Hello guys, good morning and welcome to Exampur. Good morning everyone. Dhirendra Kumar, good morning. Please join this session. As you know, at this time we are doing the session that is dependent on the Down to Earth magazine. So, Down to Earth magazine, as you know, that an important magazine for uh, environment and geography perspective. And today's topic is related to the biodiversity. Biodiversity is an important topic of the environment because the biodiversity at the global level present at the present time the world is talking about the biodiversity conservation, and biodiversity conservation is essential for the human being as well and other organism. And because of the developmental process, we are doing the blind development. Some time we did the blind developmental activities, and that is due to the blind developmental activities there is a many negative impacts has been seen. That negative impact has been seen, and that is why today we are concerning about the biodiversity conservation. Okay, so in the Down to Earth magazine, in the last month Down to Earth magazine article was printed that is related to the biodiversity. So we will discuss the biodiversity thing. Here question is this is your question, and through this question we will try to cover the topics. We will try to relate the topic from the conventions. We will try to understand the things which has done in the relation of the biodiversity at the global level and at the national level. Okay, so here is a question: discuss the structure of the biodiversity management created in the federal units of country, highlighting the functions and the responsibilities at each level, and also throw light on the challenges faced in the implementation of the Biodiversity Act 2002. Okay, so this is your question. In this question, there is a requirement of this question is you should know about the what is the structure for the biodiversity conservation, for the biodiversity governance. What are the structure at the federal level? What are the institution, or what are the organization which is working on the state level, at the district level, at the national level, and how that organizations or the institutions are related to the international institutions and the convention and other organizations. So you should know about, basically in this question you should know about the governance sections of the biodiversity. What are the governance sections of the biodiversity? Okay, so here firstly you should know about the what is the biodiversity, and how the biodiversity or the how the biodiversity is basically came into the picture, and what is the biodiversity and how biodiversity conservation is taking place, and when the seriously effort was made in the conservation of the biodiversity. Okay, so biodiversity, that means our topic is the biodiversity and the things related to the biodiversity conservation. Firstly, you should know about the what is the biodiversity, what are the measurement for the biodiversity, how we can measure the biodiversity. So what are the measurements of the biodiversity? If the biodiversity, if there is a requirement of conservation of anything, so that means there is a threat on the particular thing. If anything is under that threat, then you require to conserve that particular thing. So if the biodiversity conservation is came into the picture, that means there is a threat, or and that is why the conservation is taking place. So biodiversity conservation, if the biodiversity conservation is taking place, that means there are threats. There are some threats which will impact the biodiversity. So what are the threats? How the biodiversity is in the declining condition, why the biodiversity is in declining condition, and what are the impact of the biodiversity declining condition. So biodiversity threat and what are the consequences of the biodiversity loss. Okay, if there are threats to the biodiversity, that means there is a loss in the biodiversity. If there is a loss in the biodiversity, then it has the consequences. So what are the consequences when we lost the biodiversity? What is the impact of the biodiversity? We should understand this aspect of this biodiversity. So this is the traditional portion, threat and the consequences. So next one is the, if there is a threat, so there are requirement of the conservation. So what are the conservation methods and how we are conserving the biodiversity? So what are the conservation methods of the biodiversity? So conservation and how the global dimension or the global world is concerning about the biodiversity conservation, and how the India is concerning about the biodiversity conservation, we should know about that thing. Okay, so this is the conservation, threat, loss, consequences and the conservation. Next one is, what are the governance sections related to the biodiversity conservation? This governance sections has some institutions. This governance section has some rules, law. Okay, so what are the that laws? What are that rules? What are the that institutions at the level, at the national level as well as the global level? So governance section, we should understand the governance section as the global level as well as the national level. Global level as well as the national level. Okay, so I think this dimension is sufficient. So question is related to this section. Question is basically related to this section, how the biodiversity conservation institutions or the governance are related or established at the federal structure of the India. Okay, so as you know, as in the polity that we has the federal structure, and if anything is related to the, if anything is started to conserve, if anything is started for the conservation of anything, then there is a multi-level approach requirement. There is a requirement of the multi-level approach, because we have the different structure, we have the different level of the governance, we have the different level of the government section. So we require the multi-level conservation methods. So here the question is basically, if you're focusing on the question is related to the national governance section, which is related to the biodiversity. But we should understand the all the dimensions. So we will start from here. Okay, what is the biodiversity, and what are the measurement for the biodiversity? What are the threats and why the biodiversity is in losing condition? And what are the conservation? What are the conservation ways? What are the methods of the conservation of the biodiversity? And why we should conserve the biodiversity? So what is the impact on the biodiversity loss? And now next one is the governance section. Okay, so what is the things? Firstly, you should understand here from this section, what is the biodiversity? If we talk about the earth, there are many species, uncountable species, and we couldn't recognize the more than 10% species which are found on the earth's surface. That means we only recognize only 10% species that is found on the earth. So you can understand how many Okay, so we only recognize the only 10% of the species that is found on the Earth's surface or the Earth, because there is a many scope, there is a large a lot of scope to understand the things, to recover to discover the species, that's to discover the many new species. So you understand that only 10% species has been recognized. And at the global, at the earth system or the earth biosphere, you understand, if you understand the concept of the ecosystem, that you know that every organism that is found on the earth surface or the earth is directly or indirectly related to each other. And if we all the organism, if the all organism are related to each other, so they have the impact on each other, they has been impacted by others, and they also has impact on the other organism. So there is a relation between the organism, there is a hidden relation, or you can say direct or indirect relation is being established by the nature in the ecosystem. Okay, so if any particular place has the lot number or more number of the species, and population is high, what is the biodiversity? Biodiversity, there are two terms. There is the one term is called the biological, and the second one is the diversity. So biological diversity is called the biodiversity. So biological diversity is called the biodiversity. Biological means the organism which has the life. Diversity means differences. Okay, differences. Diversity means in the positive sense, differences. That means variations. Okay, so biological, that means the species or the organism, you can say the organisms. Okay, biology means which is related to the organism. Okay, so if any particular place has the more variation, has the more differences in at the biological level means at the organisms level, either organisms is related to the animal kingdom or related to the plant kingdom. So if there is a variations, so that particular region has the rich biodiversity. So what is the biodiversity? You should know about this. The organism variation is, or the variation in the organisms if is high, then it is called the biodiversity of that particular place. Okay, so biodiversity means in the layman term, you can understand if any particular place has the more number of the species. So species is high, or the number of species is high, and their population is high. If their population is also high, then it has the more biodiversity. As example, if any particular region has the 10 lions plus 20 tigers and 30 leopards, okay, and other 1000 deers, okay, these are the organisms here found. And another region which has the 5 lions, 2 tigers, 100 deers and 2 leopards. So comparatively, if you compare these two areas, here the number of the organism is relatively less. The number of the organism is relatively less. So this region has the less biodiversity than this region. This region has the more biodiversity than this region because it has the more number of the organism. So more number of the organism, more species of the organism can determine the biodiversity of any particular place. So biodiversity is related to variation, and that variation is maybe on the species level, this may be on the genetic level, this may be on the community level. Okay, so biodiversity means, what is the literally meaning of the biodiversity? I think you understand this thing, biodiversity meaning. So number of species is high, population is high at this particular region, that is has the more biodiversity. Okay, so biodiversity is basically this biodiversity can be observed at the different level. Firstly, it is observed at the genetic level. Firstly, it is observed as the genetic level. Second, at the species level. And finally, at the community level. At the community level. What are the biodiversity at the genetic level? We understand, we read in bio chapters or in the biology that we all persons, either we are the siblings, either we are siblings, we have the genetic materials differences. We has the genetic material differences. Me and my brother or my sister both are not at the same genetic material. Some genetic material are different. Okay, genetic material are same, but genetic characteristics are different, and that is why you read that the fingerprint are not same to everyone. There is a differences at the genetic level. So, what is the genetic biodiversity? Genetic biodiversity means if any species, if any organism group has the different genetic material, that means the genetic material are the variable, or the genetic material has the diverse in the condition, that particular type of the that particular type of the biodiversity is called genetic biodiversity. So biodiversity, that means the diversity in the genetic material of the organism determine the genetic biodiversity. Suppose if an organism like a plant which is located, suppose this is a mango tree, suppose this is a mango tree of this particular place. So this plant has the some different genetic material. Okay, and another mango plant which is located at the same place, if this mango plant or this mango tree has the different genetic material, if you go there and you bring a mango from this tree and you bring a mango from this tree, okay, fruit from this tree and fruit from this tree, and you observe that fruits, then you will get that the genetic materials are not same, genetic materials are different. So if any particular place, at any particular place there is a diversity in the genetic material, then this type of the diversity is called the genetic diversity, and this happen in the same species or the same type of the organism. Okay, so there is a comparison of the mango tree with the mango tree. See, okay, so this type of the biodiversity is called the genetic diversity. As a human being, as in the human being, if you consider in the human being that the genetic material of a person and the genetic material of the different person and genetic material of the different person are different, has the differences, has many differences. So these differences create the genetic diversity. Understand? Niranjan Kumar, good morning. Ajit Kumar, Jain. Vimlesh Kumar, good morning. Good morning. I think you understand the what is the genetic diversity. Please confirm me that you are getting my points or not. Niranjan Kumar, what is the genetic biodiversity? I think you should you understand this. If you are not getting, please confirm me. Okay, so biodiversity, in the simple words, biodiversity at the genetic level or the diversity in the genetic material is considered as the genetic diversity. So, okay, and that is why it is very, if the genetic diversity is found at any region, then it is a very useful or very it has very advantage. It has a more advantages. If the genetic diversity is high, if the genetic diversity is high in the particular place, then it has the more chance to stable. Okay, so genetic diversity is related to the stability of the organism, and that is why the marriage in the Hindu religion in the ancient time period, the marriages of the same gotras means the people which are related to the same clone or the same same region or the same particular family, and that is why the same Gotra's marriage was prohibited. Why? What are the scientific reason behind that? Because the if the human being or the if the people are related to the same family, then their genetic material is almost same. Genetic material, some differences are occurs, but almost genetic materials are same. If the two peoples which have the same genetic material, if they has any problem, they have any disease in the genetic disease, then that particular genetic disease will carry forward, and that is why, and the other some reasons also there. So if there is a genetic diversity will be vanished. If the same genetic material people started to marry and they produce they produce their children, then the genetic material or the genetic diversity is started to decline. So that is why this was the prohibited. That is the scientific reason behind that. And today when we understand the genetic diversity, we can relate that particular thing from that particular books or whatever there. Okay, so genetic diversity, I think you understand. The next one is the species, the diversity at the level of the species. So here you understand genetic material diversity and the species diversity. If an organism is found on the earth and they has the many species, so if there are many species, if you understand the tigers, if you consider the tiger has the many species, the Royal Bengal tiger, the Siberian tiger, the African tiger, then different types of the tiger. That means the tiger has the different species according to their habitat, according to their local impact or the local consequences or the local weather condition or local climatic condition, whatever you want to say. So species means if any organism has the different type of the species or the different type of the organisms which has some differences, but they can produce the offspring organism, that particular type of the diversity is called the species diversity. So firstly you should understand what is the species. Species are the organisms which can reproduce the offspring species or the offspring organism. That organisms is called the species. Okay, so species means the animals belonging from same group of the same community, same group, and they can produce the offspring organism. So this is called the species. So diversity at the level of the species is called the species diversity. Okay, and the next one is the community. Community means, what is the meaning of the community? Community is basically the organisms found at the particular place, all the type of the organism. So all organisms, if all organisms are found at a particular place, then it form the community. So if there are many type of the organisms found, many species are found, many type of the plants are found, their population is very high. So if at the community level, the number of species as well as the number of organism is related to the population. You can say the population and the number of species. If the number of species is higher and the population is also higher, then it consider and it determine the community or community biodiversity. Okay, so this is the community biodiversity. So biodiversity at the three level: genetic, species, and the community biodiversity. I think you understand the things. What are the biodiversity and what is the region. What is the measurement of the biodiversity? There are measurements, there are three types of the measurement: alpha biodiversity measurement, alpha biodiversity measurement, beta biodiversity measurement, and gamma biodiversity measurement. Alpha biodiversity measurement is related to the biodiversity of any particular place. If any particular place is related here, if any particular place is found, whatever biodiversity is found in this region is terms as the alpha biodiversity, or you can say it is measured by the alpha biodiversity. And the second one is the beta biodiversity. Beta biodiversity is basically the comparison between the two adjacent ecosystem or the two adjacent region. So this is the comparison between the this ecosystem and this ecosystem. So beta biodiversity is the method of the biodiversity measurement, that is the comparison between the two adjacent biodiversity region. Okay, so I think you understand the two adjacent biodiversity region. This is the beta biodiversity method. And the gamma, what is the gamma biodiversity measurement? Gamma biodiversity measurement is the biodiversity measurement of the entire, or you can say the whole ecosystem of any particular region. So there is a one biodiversity of the single species. Alpha biodiversity related to the biodiversity of the single species at the particular place. Beta biodiversity is the comparison between the two biodiversity region, two ecosystem region. And gamma biodiversity is the biodiversity method or the biodiversity measurement method as a whole. Okay, so there are three methods for the biodiversity conservation. Okay, alpha, beta, and gamma biodiversity measurement. So this is the biodiversity measurement. Now, what are the threats on the biodiversity? Why we are concerning related to the biodiversity? Why? What are the threats? You can relate it from your pre-industrial time period, or you can relate it before pre-industrial time period, because we at the kingdom time, when the kings was in the picture, they usually try to hunt the animals for their passion or for their entertainment. You can not passion, this is the entertainment. Many kings was used to kill the animals for their entertainment, just entertainment. If you want to entertain, you can kill any organism. So it is not a fair thing. Okay, you cannot kill any organism. Okay, because all the lives are created by the nature, all the lives has the contribution, all the lives has is contribution in the nature. So you cannot kill any life. Okay, so what are the threats before the conservation, threats before the biodiversity? Why the biodiversity is in declining phase? What are the reasons behind this? Okay, threats. Firstly, you understand that the biodiversity is corroborated by all the organism, not only human being. All organisms are considered under the biodiversity in this plants as well as the animal kingdom. Okay, so plants and animals all are the part of the biodiversity of any particular place or the biodiversity of the earth. Okay, so you never be centric on the human being, not only human being. Human being is a teeny component, not a large component. It is a teeny component of the animal kingdom, but it has changes a lot of in the nature, a lot changes. It has done a lot of changes in the nature. So human being is a teeny component of the animal kingdom, but it has done many changes on the nature. So this is the main concern point. So threat on the biodiversity. So threat on the biodiversity, that means biodiversity threat has been created by the human being, but that particular threats or the threats has the impact on the other organism more than the human being. If at the present time you can imagine that we develop the things, we innovative, we has done some innovative ideas, we has research and development, and that is why we invented many different things like the AC, refrigerator, and the many other things. We are using that equipments, we are using that apparatus in our homes, but the result is global warming. The result of that particular uses is the global warming. But what are the consequences of the global warming? Which animals or the which of the species are impacted by that global warming? So if you consider that you will look that the other organisms are more affected than the human being. If the global warming, that means the global temperature will arise, then you will put yourself into your homes, but any wild animal or the any animals which are moving in your state, they don't have any home, so where they can go? They do you don't left any place for any don't left any place for safer place for the organism, so where they should go? So this is the unanswerable question. So that is why they are started to extinct, they are started to invisible. So there is a problem. Plants, animals, and the human being, biodiversity is related to this. During the industrial time period, or during the when the population increases, our population increases, and before the industrial time period, industrial revolution, when the industrial revolution was taken place at the global stage, we has done a lot of deforestation. The pace of the deforestation was very high at that particular time period. Deforestation, okay, and mostly wild animals are related. The mostly wild animals are related at this forest region. Wild animals are related at the forest region, and you had done that the deforestation. That means you destroyed their habitats. You destroyed their habitats. If you destroyed their habitat, where they go? They don't have the habitat, and due to the destruction in their habitat, they started to move here and there, and the competition was increased in that community. You understand the interaction. I think you studied the interaction or the community interaction. If the resources are limited and the organisms are high in number, or the population of the organism is high, then there is an interaction that is called the competition, and the competition will harmful for the weaker animals or the weaker organism, because the stronger organism will replace the weaker organism, and weaker organism is started to extinct. Weaker organism started to extinct. Okay, so this type of the activity is responsible for the biodiversity. So firstly, during the industrial time period, we destroyed the jungles, we destroyed the forest region, and that is why their habitat was started to sink, and due to that sinkness of the habitat, they started to move here and there in the different region, and they are that particular competitive behavior or the competitive interaction between the communities was responsible for the extinction of the weaker communities or the weaker section or weaker organisms of the ecosystem. Okay, so firstly. Second, at the present time, our population or the human being population are increasing at the okay, so population increasing, our human being population are increasing very rapidly. So population, if our population is increasing rapidly, so there are requirement of the habitat, there is requirement for the settlement, and there for the food security there is a requirement of the agricultural field. And for the fulfilling of that requirements, we again started to deforestation. We again started to deforestation, and this deforestation are also has increased the pace of the extinction of the organism, and that particular extinction are responsible for the biodiversity loss. So firstly, habitat loss or habitat loss is the major reason for the biodiversity loss. Second, sometimes habitat loss was not taking completely, but we interfere in the wild areas, or we interfere in the habitat region, and we fragmented, we created some infrastructure which are useful for human being, but that infrastructure basically fragmented their habitat or the habitat region. Like you can understand, if there is a forest region, and this forest region is connected, forest region, and human being started to build a road from this forest region. So now this habitat is fragmented. This habitat is fragmented form. This has been fragmented by the human being. Now the organisms has the less area, because this infrastructure, they are not familiar with this type of infrastructure. So this is the new thing for them, or the organism found in this region, and maybe they could not familiar by this infrastructure, and the organism which is found in this region, and this organism found in this region, they got separated. If they got separated, if there is so there may be a problem arises. So this type of the fragmentation is also responsible for the biodiversity loss. And sometimes this of the fragmentation, if suppose this is a road, or you can say this is a rail, or you can say this is a electricity line, anything, this are responsible for the death or the accidental death of the organism found in this region. Accidental death of the organism. And this type of the death, firstly, this type of death is related to the biodiversity. Firstly, you fragmented their habitat, you has done the limitation for them, you shrink their area, so their movement will be hampered. Okay, and again, if they want to move from one region to another region, if you are a reader of the newspaper, then you understand, you can understand it, that many of the elephants are cut down by the on the railway track, so their lives are on the threat. So this is the also responsible factor for the biodiversity. Second, habitat fragmentation, habitat loss are the major concern for the biodiversity. Okay. Next one is global warming. Global warming is also a major concern for the biodiversity loss. Global warming is also major concern for the biodiversity loss. Global warming is started to increase the temperature of the earth, average temperature of the earth. Many organisms which are not in the adaptation condition, their adaptation tendency or the adaptation capacity is not so much, so they cannot survive. Some organism which can survive, they are termed as the euthermal, but organism which is under the stenothermal, they cannot survive. They started to die. If they started to die, that means they are extinct, in the extinct condition. So global warming is also a impact. Global warming is also a major factor for the biodiversity loss. Okay, so for the biodiversity loss, global warming is also an important factor. Okay, so these are the major concern for the biodiversity loss, or the major reason for the biodiversity loss. Very first time when the biodiversity, a serious step was taken for the biodiversity loss conservation. In 1992, during the Rio Earth Summit, a serious concern or the serious effort was taken place, and that step was the formation of the United Nations Biodiversity Conservation. Okay, so there is a serious concern, or the serious step was taken place in the form of the UNCBD at the global level. Okay, so UNCBD means United Nations Conference on the Biodiversity. UN Conference on the biodiversity, on the biological diversity. Okay, so this was the first major concern that was taken, the major step was taken during the Rio Earth Summit. Rio Earth Summit. You studied that there were three major sister organizations came into the picture, that is the UNFCCC, UNCBD and UNCCD for the combat of desertification, UN, and this for the biological diversity and for climatic change. UNFCCC, UNCBD, there are three sister wings, UNFCCC, UNCBD and UNCCD. ठीक है, ये तीनों उस टाइम पे फॉर्म में आई थी. ठीक है, UNCBD फर्स्ट टाइम बायोडाइवर्सिटी कंजर्वेशन, it was the first serious effort for the biodiversity conservation. Biodiversity conservation. What are the UNCBD? What are the mandate of the UNCBD? What are the important things of the UNCBD? And on the basis of the UNCBD, there are many organizations has been established by the nations or by the countries at their own nations. And like in India, on the basis of the biodiversity conservation, or you can say to fulfill the aim of the biodiversity conservation, or the UNCBD in the United Nations, we has established the Biodiversity Act 2002. India has established an act that is called the Biodiversity Act 2002. This Biodiversity Act was major aim of this Biodiversity Act to fulfill all the aim or the requirements of the biodiversity UNCBD, or United Nations Convention on the Biodiversity. So what is the Biodiversity Act 2002? This is the national level condition. UNCBD, and again the Cartagena and Nagoya Protocol. This is the Cartagena and Nagoya. These are the protocols. Okay, and Biodiversity Act, the Biodiversity Board at the state level. Okay, these are the institutions which are working in the field of the biodiversity conservation. Basically, these are related at the global level, but this is related to the national level. So in the next class, we will understand these governance sections of the biodiversity, and today we will cover the we covered the traditional section of the biodiversity. I hope you understand the things. If any problem, you can put your query. You can put up your query in the offline comment box, and whatever you have query, whatever you have anything which has a suggestion for us, then you can put that suggestions or the query on the offline comment box. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this session. How you enjoyed this session, and firstly you should understand the this channel is basically related to the English medium channel, English medium student which are preparing for the UPSC by the English medium, and all the classes, all the entire team is related, entire team is working on your content, and I think you should appreciate the effort of the entire team, and you should follow this channel, and you can if you are new on this channel, so please subscribe this channel and be continue with us on this channel. Okay, so thank you so much. Thanks a lot.